100 pounds of potatoes in a space no bigger than a card table. 4 square feet, a spot small enough to set a chair on. And I'll be upfront with you right from the start, the way I believe in being. 100 pounds is your best case outcome in an excellent year. Realistically, your first season will land somewhere around 40 to 60 pounds. But hold on to that number for a second, because 40 to 60 pounds out of 4 square feet is the same as, or more than, what most people get out of a full 30-foot row that leaves their back aching. That's not a gimmick. It's just an old growing method almost nobody still uses. Here's what nobody's ever told you. The reason your potato harvests have always disappointed you was never your soil, and it was never your gardening skill. It's that you've been growing them flat, sprawled sideways across the ground, the exact way every seed catalog teaches. And the whole time they're spread out there, hogging your best sunny real estate, the beans and squash and greens you actually wanted have nowhere left to grow. The traditional method grows them standing upright instead. And the reason this works comes down to simple biology. When you bury a potato stem, the buried section sends out side shoots, and the tip of each shoot swells into a brand new potato. A typical garden row only lets you bury an inch or two of stem, which gives you a handful of potatoes per plant. But if you keep burying that stem as it grows taller, a foot, then 2, then 3, every fresh inch you bury produces more shoots. And every shoot means another potato. More buried stem simply equals more potatoes. That's the entire secret, and it's exactly why it's always been said that a smart gardener makes the same groundwork twice as hard. So let me walk you through exactly how to do this. Every step, the specific type of potato you need, and a simplified straw-only version at the end that a complete beginner can set up in 20 minutes. Quick note before we dig in. I've put together a fuller guide that goes well beyond just this one method, covering everything traditional households used to know about feeding a family off a small plot of ground and keeping a cellar stocked through winter. If that interests you, I'll leave it linked below. Now, on to the potatoes. Here's the single step that makes or breaks this entire method. Get this one wrong, and nothing else you do afterward will save it. You absolutely must start with the correct type of potato, and this is exactly where I see careful, diligent people fail. They build a beautiful tower, they follow every other step precisely, and they harvest 10 or 15 pounds and walk away convinced the whole method is nonsense. It wasn't the method. It was the potato. Here's what you need to understand. There are 2 broad categories of potatoes, and they behave completely differently inside a tower. The first type sets all of its potatoes in a single cluster near the bottom of the plant. No matter how much additional stem you bury after that point, it won't produce a single extra potato. You could build your tower 6 feet tall and get the exact same modest handful you'd have gotten planting it flat in the ground. Most early season potato varieties fall into this category. The Yukon Golds, the red varieties people often reach for first. They're perfectly good potatoes. They're simply the wrong choice for this technique. The second type keeps producing new potatoes all along the stem as you continue burying it. Those are the ones you need, and using them is non-negotiable. Look for these names: Russet, Burbank, German Butterball, Canela Russet, KBC, and Elba. These varieties reward you for hilling them up tall because they'll set potatoes at every level all the way up the tower. Buy certified seed potatoes from a garden center or seed supplier and specifically ask for one of those names. Expect to pay somewhere around $3 to $4 a pound, and you'll need 4 to 5 pounds per tower, so roughly $15 to $20 to plant one tower, which can return 50 pounds or more. That's the entire investment. Don't try to save money using potatoes from the grocery store. It isn't actually a savings. Grocery store potatoes are very commonly treated with a chemical that prevents them from sprouting on the shelf, and that same treatment will work against you the whole growing season, leaving you with a thin, patchy stand and no obvious explanation why. The other advantage certified seed gives you is clean stock. It's grown specifically to be free of diseases that hitch a ride on ordinary potatoes and linger in your soil for years afterward. Between the anti-sprouting chemical and the disease risk, grocery store potatoes end up costing you far more than certified seed ever would. Spend the small amount on the real thing. It's the cheapest insurance you'll ever buy in that garden. One more word on variety, because I honestly cannot stress this enough. If you take away nothing else from this entire video, Remember that the type of potato determines everything. I've watched people execute every other single step flawlessly, the building, the layering, the watering, all of it, and end up with a disappointing harvest simply because they planted the wrong variety, then blame themselves or blame the method. It was neither. It was the seed. So when you're standing at that counter, say the names out loud: Russet, Burbank, German Butterball, Canelo Russet, KBC, Elba, and don't let anyone talk you into the attractive early variety on sale by the entrance. That's precisely the kind of potato that quits after one layer. About 2 or 3 days before planting, cut your seed potatoes into pieces roughly the size of an egg, making sure each piece has at least 2 eyes, those small dimples where the sprouts emerge from. If a seed potato is already small, close to egg-sized, you can leave it whole. There's no requirement to cut it. With larger potatoes, inspect them first and cut so the eyes are distributed evenly among your pieces, rather than clustered on one chunk with none on another. Lay the cut pieces out cut side up in a single layer somewhere cool and shaded, and let those cut surfaces dry and callus over for 2 to 3 days. Don't skip this step. A freshly cut potato placed straight into damp soil is very likely to rot before it even sprouts, leaving gaps in your stand. Letting it heal over first is what protects it from rotting. For one tower, plan on around 4 to 5 pounds of cut seed potatoes, which gives you enough pieces for 3 to 4 layers as you build. Now, let's build the structure. There's more than one way to do this, and I'll give you the version that works best and is easiest to put together. Take a length of welded wire fencing with 2-inch by 4-inch openings and cut a piece roughly 12.5 feet long. Bend it into a circle just under 4 feet across and fasten the 2 ends together with wire ties or a few short pieces of baling wire. This gives you a round cage sitting on about 4 square feet of ground. Place it on level ground in the sunniest spot available, and I mean full sun, 6 to 8 hours minimum. Potatoes simply will not produce a real harvest in shade, so don't waste your effort putting the tower anywhere the sun doesn't reach fully. Once the cage is standing, line the inside bottom foot or so with straw, pressing it firmly against the wire all the way around to create a kind of nest. That straw lining keeps your growing mix from spilling out through the gaps. A word about cutting that fencing, since the cut ends are sharp. Wear sturdy gloves and trim it so a few inches of cross wire stick out on one end. Those little prongs hook into the openings on the other end and hold the cylinder together nearly as well as the ties do. Set everything on level ground too, because a tower built on a slope will shed water toward the low side and dry out unevenly, leaving you puzzled about why one half is underperforming. If your ground isn't level, take a few minutes with a spade to level it before you fill anything. If you'd rather skip the wire altogether, the exact same method works in a 55-gallon drum with drainage holes drilled in the bottom and sides. A large trash can prepare the same way, or a wooden box built from 4 pallets wired into a square. The shape genuinely doesn't matter. What matters is that the walls rise at least 3 feet, water can drain from the bottom, and there's enough room across for 4 or 5 seed pieces per layer. That said, the wire and straw version is the cheapest option and the easiest to disassemble at harvest time, which is why I'd point any beginner toward it first. Here's where the actual growing begins. In the bottom of your tower, add about 6 inches of a mix that's half compost, half straw, or, if you prefer, equal parts compost, garden soil, and straw. The key requirement is that it stays loose, drains well, and is nutrient-rich. Place 4 or 5 of your seed potato pieces on top, spaced evenly with the eyes facing upward. Cover them with another 4 to 6 inches of the same mix, then water thoroughly until everything is evenly damp, not soaked. You're not aiming for a swamp in there. That's your first layer complete, and the tower should now be filled to about a foot. Now you wait. Within a week or 2, depending on soil warmth, green shoots will push up through the top. And this is exactly the point where ordinary gardening stops, and this method keeps going. In a traditional row, you'd hill once and leave the plant alone. Here you keep building. Every time those shoots grow about 8 to 10 inches above the surface of the mix, you add another layer, pile 4 to 6 more inches of compost and straw, mix around the stems, burying all of it except the top 3 or 4 inches of leaves. You're intentionally covering most of the plant each time, because that's what signals the buried stem to send out a fresh round of side shoots, and every one of those becomes another potato in the making. Let me walk through the rhythm so you can visualize it. You plant, and the tower is filled to about a foot. The shoots emerge, and you let them reach roughly 10 inches tall, so there's 8 to 10 inches of green showing above the mix. You bury all but the top 3 or 4 inches. That's your first hilling, and now the tower's filled to about 1.5 feet. 2 or 3 weeks later, the plants have climbed back up out of that layer, showing another 8 to 10 inches of green. You bury it again, leaving just the top exposed. Now you're past 2 feet. You repeat this a third time, sometimes a fourth, and by the end, the tower stands the full 3 feet tall, packed with buried stem from bottom to top, with potatoes forming along every inch of it. That's the whole system in motion. The plant climbs, you bury it. It climbs again, you bury it again. Each round adds another shelf of potatoes you'd never have gotten from a flat row. One thing to watch as you build: don't pack that mix down firmly around the stems when adding a layer. Add it loosely and let it settle naturally on its own. Potatoes need to push out into soft, airy ground to swell up properly. Pack it too tight, and you choke them off, resulting in small, sparse potatoes. Loose and rich is what you want at every single layer. Here's the timing to keep in mind. In most temperate climate gardens, you'll plant your tower 2 to 3 weeks after the last frost, once the soil has warmed to around 45 degrees. The first hilling happens roughly 3 weeks after the shoots break through the surface. After that, hill again every 2 to 3 weeks, whenever the stems reach that 8 to 10 inch mark. From planting day to your final hilling typically runs about 10 to 12 weeks. If you're in a colder climate, you'll plant slightly later and the whole process moves a bit faster. In warmer climates, you can start earlier and may squeeze in an extra hilling over the season. Now, watering, and I want you paying close attention here, because more towers fail from watering mistakes than from anything else. A tower dries out considerably faster than a garden row does. In a row, the surrounding earth helps hold moisture in place. In a tower, that mix is exposed to open air on every side through the wire, and wind pulls moisture out of it quickly. So water deep and water consistently. Here's the rule I'd give you. Push your finger about 3 inches into the mix. If it's dry down there, water thoroughly until you see water coming out through the straw at the bottom. During the hottest stretch of summer, that might mean watering every other day. In cooler or rainy weather, twice a week is usually plenty, but keep it consistent. A potato that repeatedly dries out and then gets drenched grows up knobby, small, and split. A potato kept evenly moist grows up smooth and full. Consistency is the entire key. As for feeding, the compost in your mix supplies most of what the plants need. If you want to push your harvest a bit higher, side dress with a balanced organic fertilizer or pour on a little compost tea every 3 to 4 weeks during active growth. Just don't overdo the nitrogen, the nutrient responsible for lush green leaves. Too much, and you'll grow an impressive-looking bush on top with almost nothing to show for it underground. You want the plant's energy going into producing potatoes, not showing off its foliage. Let me name the common mistakes I see, so you can sidestep them entirely. First is variety. I've already made this point repeatedly, so I'll only say it once more. Wrong potato, disappointing harvest, no exceptions. Second is shade. People tuck their tower against the north side of the house or under a tree for convenience, then wonder why the results are poor. Potatoes are sun-loving plants, full stop. Give them the brightest spot you've got. Third is letting the mix dry out, which I'll come back to shortly because it's the biggest one. Fourth is hilling too conservatively. A cautious gardener buries an inch or 2 and feels satisfied, but you have to be bold about it. Bury most of the plant each time, leaving only the top few inches of leaf visible, because the buried portion is what actually produces the food. Fifth is starting too ambitiously. People hear 100 pounds and want to build 4 towers their very first spring. Build one, learn its watering needs, learn its rhythm, learn your own ground through a full honest season, and then expand next year with real experience behind you. Here's how you know when to stop hilling and start preparing to dig. Once the plants flower, that's your signal the potatoes underneath are well underway, and that's when you stop adding layers, letting the plant channel everything it has into fattening up the potatoes instead of growing taller. From flowering to harvest usually takes another 4 to 6 weeks. You'll know it's truly ready when the vines start yellowing and dying back naturally on their own. Don't rush that final stretch. Those last weeks are when the potatoes put on their final weight and the skins toughen up, and a tough skin is exactly what allows a potato to keep all winter in storage instead of going soft by the holidays. Then comes the best part, the part worth doing with grandchildren if you have any nearby. If you built the wire tower, simply snip the ties, unwrap the fencing, and let the whole column tumble over. Then dig through it by hand like a treasure hunt, because the potatoes are sitting at every level, top to bottom. It genuinely delights kids to see it. It's a wonderful thing to show a child that food comes up out of the ground like that through your own effort, and in such abundance. Now let me circle back to that 100-pound figure because I promised honesty about it up front, and I'll deliver on that. 100 pounds is achievable from a mature russet tower in an excellent year by someone who's practiced this method across many seasons and has every detail dialed in. But your first year, plan realistically on 40 to 60 pounds from one small 4-square-foot tower and treat anything beyond that as a welcome bonus. I'd hate for you to harvest an impressive 50 pounds and feel disappointed just because a headline promised 100. Getting 40 to 60 pounds off a plot the size of a card table when a full 30-foot row gives you the same or less is genuinely remarkable. Get a season or two of practice under your belt, learn your own watering habits and your own soil, and that number climbs from there. So, here's the question worth sitting with. Why does almost nobody grow potatoes this way anymore, when older generations understood it perfectly well? The answer isn't that someone hid the technique. It's actually worse than that, in a way, because nobody had to. There's simply no profit in teaching you to grow 100 pounds of potatoes from 4 square feet of your own ground and a couple dollars worth of seed. Seed companies would rather sell you the popular, easy variety that sets a single layer and stops, the exact type that fails in a tower. Grocery stores would rather you never fill your own cellar at all. And every gardening book and seed catalog teaches the long flat row simply, because that's how it's always been printed, so that's how everyone plants. Nobody sat in a room scheming to make you forget the better method. There was just never a dollar in reminding you. So the knowledge quietly slipped out of one generation and never made it into the next. That's not a conspiracy. It's just a system running on its own momentum with nobody steering, and it nearly cost us something genuinely worth preserving. If any of this changes how you plan to plant this coming spring, I'd genuinely love to hear about it. Tell me in the comments what area you're growing in and how old your house is. I love knowing where this old knowledge is taking root again. And tell me which variety you settled on, because someone reading is likely about to make the one determining mistake, and your comment might save their entire tower. Before I let you go, let me give you that simplified version I promised. For anyone looking at the wire and building process and thinking, that's more than I want to take on. There's a way to do this using nothing but straw. Lay 4 seed pieces directly on bare ground in a small square about 2 feet across, and cover them with about 8 inches of loose straw. That's the entire setup. No soil, no compost, no structure, just potatoes on the ground under a pile of straw. When shoots push up through at 8 to 10 inches, pile on another thick layer of straw, burying most of the green again. Repeat that 3 more times across the season, and by the end you'll have a straw mound roughly 2.5 feet tall. The straw keeps the potatoes in darkness where they need to be, holds moisture better than you'd expect, and breaks down slowly enough to maintain its shape all season. At harvest, simply pull the pile apart, and there are your potatoes, clean, dry, sitting right in the straw, no digging required. A mound like this typically yields around 50 pounds for very little labor. The wire tower will still outperform it, since the compost feeds the plants more, but for a beginner, the straw mound is forgiving enough that it's exactly where I'd tell you to start. And if you toss in a handful of balanced organic fertilizer with each straw layer as you build it, you'll close most of that gap in yield. Next time, I'll show you how older generations kept those potatoes sound and sweet clear through to spring, without a freezer or anything plugged into the wall. How a proper root cellar is set up, the temperature and humidity you're aiming for, what to store next to what, and the one common mistake that turns a whole winter's supply of potatoes soft and sprouted before February. Because growing the food is only half the work, keeping it is the other half. And that's where the real abundance actually lives. The whole method comes down to one simple idea. Buried stems make more potatoes. The tower, the straw, all the hilling, it's only ever a way of giving the plant more stem to bury. Grow it standing up instead of lying down. Give it steady water, full sun, and the right seed variety, and one small square of your own ground can feed your table all winter long. Try it this season and tell me how it goes.